So, good morning and welcome to the Remote Online Notarization webinar presented by the Pennsylvania Association of Notaries, PAN. My name is John Morenzel, and I'm one of 3 instructors here at PAN. Alongside me today will be my fellow instructors. We have Crystal Ann Jones and we have Brian Crocker. Today's webinar will go no more than 1 hour. The presentation portion of the webinar will take around 15 minutes. The remainder of your time, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Please hold on to your questions until the presentation is complete. I will now hand over the presentation duties to Mr. Crocker.
Thank you, John. Let me disappear so you can concentrate on the presentation on the screen. Again, welcome to PAN's Remote Online Notarization webinar. Remote Online Notarization, also known as RON, allows a notary located in Pennsylvania to notarize for someone anywhere in the world. I'm interested to know how much you know about remote online notarization. So I'm going to go ahead and put up a question on the screen, and just interested to know where you are or where you think you are with your knowledge. I'll give you another 15 to 20 seconds to weigh in. All right, I'm going to end the question period now. Share the results so you can all see them. There are very few people that know a lot. There are some people, 101, that know a little. The majority, 120 of you, I've heard of it. And there are 42 folks out there that know absolutely nothing at all. Nobody's an expert. So if you were an expert, you probably wouldn't be on this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. If the question remains on the screen, go ahead and X out of the question in the upper right-hand corner of that question box. As a Pennsylvania notary, you may perform traditional paper-based notarizations, electronic notarizations, and remote online notarizations. With a traditional notarization, the document is in a paper format. With an electronic and a remote online notarization, the document is in an electronic format. Now, the basic principles of notarization are always the same, including demanding the personal appearance of your customer. With a traditional paper-based notarization, the customer needs to be able to exchange identification documents and the documents with you. In other words, you and the customer are in the same place at the same time. With an electronic notarization, the personal appearance guidelines are the same. You and the customer need to be in the same place at the same time. With a remote online notarization, the personal appearance requirement is met when the notary and the remotely located customer meet online using state-approved audio-visual communication technology. Now, before you perform remote online notarizations, you must first apply online to become an electronic notary. The application you fill out is the same for electronic and remote online notarizations. Then you must choose at least one vendor of approved technology. You want to purchase the technology directly from the vendor, and then you must notify the Department of State which vendors you will be using. Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, and Teams alone are not approved remote online notarization vendors. You should research the different vendors before applying to use their services because costs vary, and some vendors strictly deal with real estate transactions. I want to talk about the technology for a remote online notarization for a moment. All the approved technology vendors meet these requirements. Forgive me for a moment, my equipment is falling all around me here. The technology must allow the notary to communicate remotely with the customer in real time. The technology must allow the notary to determine the identity of the customer. The technology must allow the notary to identify the document in their presence as the same document being signed by or containing a statement made by the customer. And finally, the technology must make an audio-visual recording of the notarization. I'm going to talk about each of these requirements individually. The entire remote online notarization process needs to be done in real time, which means the notary and the customer can see and hear each other without any delay using approved audio-visual communication technology. The technology must make reasonable accommodations for people with vision, hearing, or speech impairments. The technology must allow the notary to identify the customer. There are 3 ways to identify a customer when notarizing remotely. A notary may use their own personal knowledge of the customer as a method of identification. A notary may use a credible witness to identify the customer. Or a notary may use 2 different types of identity proofing processes to identify the customer. This may include knowledge-based authentication, also known as KBA. Having the customer answer questions for which there is a pretty high probability that only the true individual would be able to answer the questions correctly, and analysis of identification credentials. In other words, the technology verifies the identification credential presented as authentic. The technology must allow a notary to identify the document being notarized as the same document being signed or containing a statement made by the customer. For example, the document displayed on the screen can be a fillable portable document format or PDF that both the customer and the notary can access. Once the customer electronically signs the PDF, the notary can sign the PDF and attach the notary certificate electronically as well. The technology must make an audio-visual recording of the notarization. The recording must include all interactions between the notary and the remotely located individual. The recording must be retained for 10 years. Once again, all of the RON vendors have the capability to make and maintain the recordings. The notary needs to be in Pennsylvania at the time of the notarization, but the remotely located customer may be anywhere in the world. If the customer is not in the United States, the Notarial Act must relate to a document that will be used in the US. The notarization must not violate the law in any foreign country, but it is not the notary's responsibility to make sure that foreign laws are not violated. A notarial certificate, notary wording, is made up of a venue and the notary statement. For a remote online notarization, the venue is the location of the notary, not the remotely located customer. The notary statements for a remote online notarization are the same as for any notarization. The notarial certificate must be modified to indicate that the notarization was performed using communication technology. The requirement is met by adding the statement, "This notarial act involved the use of communication technology." The notarial certificate and the notary's signature and stamp must be affixed to or logically associated with the electronic document. Now, this information can be displayed in different ways depending on the vendor and the document preparation software used. All notarizations must be recorded in a journal. A notary is permitted to have a separate journal for traditional and for remote online notarizations. Some of the technology vendors include an electronic journal. It's important that electronic journals be tamper evident. Pennsylvania recorders are not required to accept electronic documents. Recorders may accept a paper copy of an electronic document if a notary certifies that the paper copy is true and accurate copy of the original electronic record. To summarize, remote online notarization is permanently approved in Pennsylvania. To notarize remotely, a Pennsylvania notary must become an electronic notary and use state-approved remote online notarization communication technology. The technology needs to meet strict requirements. The notary must be in Pennsylvania during the notarization. The customer may be anywhere in the world. So you know, RON is not mandatory. A notary does not need to become a remote online notary. It is the notary's choice. For more information about remote online notarization, visit the Department of State's website. We're going to provide the link in the chat box that directs you to that page. The link is also available on a reference sheet that we have prepared for today's webinar, and we are going to post that document in the chat box as well. So John so kindly just put the link, the very long link to the Department of State's website, where there's about a day's worth of reading. And he also dropped the handout that we created into the chat box as well. Thank you, John. So to view the link and the reference sheet and to ask a question, click on chat in the Zoom bar. The chat box will appear. When you send your questions, please, because we are all helping each other here, send your questions to everyone. If you send them privately to somebody, it's going to be very difficult for us to manage the question and answer session. So it's okay to go ahead and enter your questions in the chat box now. It is just about 11:13, maybe almost 11:14. We're going to be in the room until 12 o'clock if we need to be. So you have about 45 minutes to ask your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to reappear on the screen, as are the other two.
Awesome job, Brian. So, yeah, Wendy asked a question. Can a large private company get approval to use internal technology to perform raw notarizations if they have the capability to store electronic notarization for 10 years? Wendy, unfortunately, that's not Pan's call. That is something that you would want to contact the Department of State and see if you can get an approval, because they are always adding, modifying, removing state-approved vendors. So I would give them a call or reach out to them and see if you could be approved.
Yeah, actually, I think there is an application to be approved. I'm not. I think it may be on that website, but I haven't looked very carefully recently.
Right.
Let's see. The questions are coming in very, very quickly here. So let me go back and see if I can find the next one. Is there a yearly cost for the approved technology? Alexis, the costs vary from vendor to vendor, and some of them have per transaction fees, some of them have monthly fees, some of them have yearly fees. Unfortunately, we don't keep track of that. because we don't have any kind of relationship with any of those vendors. So if you want to know what the costs are, you want to go ahead and contact the vendors directly.
Is there a company you can recommend to purchase the electronic equipment? Kind of like tying into what Brian just said, we don't have a relationship with any of the state approved vendors. What I would recommend is do your research on the vendors, because when Brian said in the presentation, it is true. There are some out there that are geared towards strictly real estate transactions. So if that's something that you're not into, you want to avoid those. But what is nice is that link that we put in the chat box, it will show you a list of the state approved vendors, and it will kind of advise you on what they specialize in if they do.
The Alexis, then we got that one, and you got LB. Oh, Sandy, what are the fees, and are there any max fees one can pay? If you're referring to how much people pay for the notarizations, I can answer that question in that the notary fees are set by the state, and they're for all types of notarization. So there is a maximum fee that you can charge for a notary fee, whether it's traditional paper-based, whether it's electronic, or whether it's a remote online notarization. There is always a way for you to make more money by charging clerical and administrative fees that you set yourself, and they're not regulated by the state.
In Michelle's question, I just kind of covered about the preferred provider. We don't really have a preferred provider. If we do, we would make that known if that time would ever come. Lori asks, is a digital signature from a third party, such as a Dentitrust, a requirement? And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I don't believe it's a requirement to go through a third party. I believe you can get the digital signature from the vendor themselves.
It's all, and again, it's all going to depend on the individual vendor. We're talking about digital certificates, digital signatures. It's all very confusing because everyone's different. And again, I'm not an expert on the technical issues that go into performing a remote online notarization, but I know once you get involved with a vendor, they perform their own training. So if you have any questions like that, that would be a question that maybe when you're doing your research that you would want to ask the vendor. Does the tech company store the info plus the journal? So if all of the vendors have the ability to store the recordings for 10 years, or the state wouldn't have approved them. The ones that offer journals, my understanding is that they store the journal. Ultimately, the journal is your responsibility and your property, so you need to have access to it all the time as well.
Can I have multiple RON vendors? If so, can I have multiple electronic journals? I don't believe there's anything stating that you only need to use one vendor. When it comes to the journals, though, I think you're permitted to have one paper style, then one electronic style. So I don't know how that would work, having multiple electronic style journals.
The way the law reads is that you may have a separate journal for traditional and for electronic notarizations. Electronic would include remote. So you can only have two journals going at one time. And I honestly wouldn't even want to have, I mean, I know you can, but I wouldn't want to have more than one. It would be very, very confusing, I think. But I'm pretty sure that having multiple electronic journals, one for each vendor, is a no. What is the average cost for an approved vendor? That I can't answer for you.
You need the online license or approval if the software is online and the customer's in the office with you. Elizabeth, from what it sounds like there is you might be trying to attempt a electronic notarization where you have the customer in the same room with you, but you're notarizing for them electronically. If that's what you're asking, you still need to be approved to do that, and you need to go through the electronic notarization process. It's free to apply, but then you do need to use state-approved technology when it comes to the electronic notarization part. So even though you might have technology, it might not be state-approved. So that's something to do your research on.
not something you wake up one day and just do. Right. That's what we tell people. Constance says, I completed my application and picked 2 vendors, but have not received anything from them. I received an email from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania showing my vendor name, and that is it. What should I do now? I'm going to advise you, Constance, to contact the vendors directly. That is going to be probably your only recourse at this point.
Corey said, I've attended a few of these sessions. I'm still somewhat confused. Is there any way you could do a YouTube video on actually showing someone doing an online notarization? So here's a couple things, Lori. We have a YouTube video. We have 2 of them, actually. The first video explains the differences between electronic and remote. And then we do have a generic RON video showing you kind of the generic steps on how a RON notarization would be completed. Now, every vendor is different. I think we've been saying that a good bit, but it is the case, unfortunately. None of them are on the same page. So there are different steps depending on which vendor you go through. My recommendation would be, Lori, if you have interest in this and you go through and you find a certain vendor, a lot of these vendors actually have videos. They'll show you how it's done. And then you can decide maybe which one's more user-friendly for you.
I would like to know, who are the vendors? Well, there are a lot of vendors. I don't have them memorized. They change a lot. There is a list that is on the Department of State's website, which I'm going to post the link to that as we speak. And I have to get back to the question now. I lost my place. Oh, well, I'll get back eventually. Sorry about that. But when you open up the link on that page for the vendors, they're going to be 2 columns. I believe, if I remember correctly, the first column is for straight electronic notaries, and the second column is for those that have the remote capabilities. Some have both, but that's how you're going to find out who they are, Troy.
Mary asked, does PAN have a list of notaries who do remote notarizations for a fee? We don't have a specific location on that, but what we do have is we do have where you could search our database for people, our members that have made themselves searchable. If you do, you could put your services out there. For example, some people will advertise that they are a mobile notary, that you also do signing agent work. So that could be something that you could advertise and provide that you are an electronic and or remote online notary. But then if somebody's looking for one, they search by their zip code, and then it's going to pull the closest notaries to them. And then they'll just need to look there under their services.
And you could potentially search on the Department of State's website. Unfortunately, they don't differentiate between electronic and remote online notarizations. They have e-notary capable out there, and they could be both, or they could be just e-notaries. So does the notary get paid through the vendor? Claire would like to know. No, they do not.
Mary just says, I have the same experience with vendors as Constance above. No response from them all. So more of a comment. Yeah, I know a lot of them were backed up during the pandemic, when the pandemic was at its peak at the beginning, because they were thrown into the fire with this. They weren't ready for a lot of people to become e-notaries and then RON notaries. So they were extremely understaffed. At this point, I would imagine they would have been caught up. So all we could do is recommend to reach out to them and see where you're at.
What's interesting, John, is that from the email we got the other day, there are approximately 77,000 notaries in Pennsylvania, and less than 2% of them, it's in between 1 and 2,000, have signed up to be either electronic or remote. Now, that doesn't even mean that the people that have signed up have gone as far as to even pick a vendor, or if they have picked a vendor, it doesn't mean they're performing these types of notarizations. So it's amazing to me how these companies aren't ready. But again,
no, and that's, I couldn't agree. When I saw that email as well. Yeah, no, when I saw that email, I thought as well, I was like, 1% is such a low number when you look at the whole realm of everything.
Again, yeah, we're getting a lot of comments about no return emails, no return calls, Hunter's saying that they're expensive. Let's see, another question maybe.
Maybe Crystal.
Okay, Crystal. So in a nutshell, a staff member who is based in Florida, whom I know and know the signature, cannot email me a doc that I then print and notarize. Not with the present format, with the way we do remote online notarization in Pennsylvania. What I believe you're describing is called remote, what's it called, John?
Sorry, what? I was reading the next
What's
question.
it called when somebody, you print the paper and notarize it?
iPen. Is
iPen.
that yeah, so it's like a wet signature, but then it's scanned and then emailed, and that's something that Pennsylvania doesn't recognize.
There are other states that do it. I mean, you could use a notary who from a state who does that, but yeah, being a Pennsylvania notary, you cannot do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was
Awesome.
so awkward.
No, we're good.
I couldn't remember iPen.
No,
it was escaping me.
Alexis just is asking, I think more so for other people's, comments about if they had any roadblocks when doing an online notary. So we'll see if anybody comments to her. But Hunter just says, I received a quote from a vendor, $15 a transaction. And yeah, it can be pricey. And this is something I know myself, I know Brian, even Crystal Ann. We don't see a lot of people when we travel and teach these either Zoom seminars or we're traveling to the hotels and we're teaching the live classes. I'm going to tell you, I think I've met one or two people that have done this. Unless you're doing it for a business, a lot of times it's real estate. If you're going to plan on doing this for your own sake, it could be cost efficient. I mean, it's going to be kind of pricey. So that's something you want to research before you go diving into this.
Sandy would like to know, does there need to be a witness to the remote online notarization? It's like any notarization. If the notarization requires an additional witness, yes. If no, then no. It's just like any notarization.
More so, we have Shauna she's saying she used Docs Verify. Anna Marie saying it could be expensive.
I want to know, I'm curious, Shauna, can you give us an estimate of how many remote online notarizations you've done? You're a good test subject for us because we don't meet many people that are doing it. And then the people we meet that are doing it have done maybe one or two or none.
Yeah, very good call. If there's more than one notary in the company, can we share the software? Yeah, I mean, you could work under that. You just need to be approved. Everybody needs to go through the approval process, but you could work under the same vendor. But that's going to be an agreement between the vendor and the notaries in that situation, because I'm sure they're going to charge per individual. So it could be something to look into.
Hey, Patricia says, I was approved as an e-notary in 2018, but did not take it any further because there was not a lot of counties accepting e-notaries at that time. The only county around me was Blair, and I'm in Cambria. Is my approval still valid, or do I need to reapply? Two questions there, actually. You asked one question, but there's another question hidden in there. So I'm gonna answer the question that you asked first. Your e-notary / remote online notarization approval expires either when your 4-year notary commission expires or when the technology expires, whichever comes first. And yes, you do need to reapply. Now, as far as counties accepting electronic documents, when they revised the law in 2020 in October to make remote online notarization permanent, they also added a phrase that said that although recorders are not required to accept electronic documents, they are able to accept electronic documents that have been printed as long as the notary certifies that the paper copy is an accurate copy of the electronic document. So that was the hidden question.
Are there additional training requirements for this prior to receiving the authorization? No, there's not. All notaries required state-approved training, 3 hours of it every 4 years. That satisfies it. Now, with the company, they might have you watch some videos and, so you can learn the technology, but no, there's no additional training.
But here's Hannah asking a similar question, maybe even the same question as somebody asked before. Does your authorization to remotely notarize renew when you renew your commission, or do you have to reapply every time you renew your general notary commission? You do need to renew the remote every time. So you apply to be a notary, and again, you go back online and you fill out that electronic notary application, and you have to renew with the vendor or vendors as well.
He asked, are there any documents that are not able to be done by Ron, such as wills? Wills and like powers of attorney, they're specialized documents, and our stance at PAN is we would recommend seeking advice from an attorney on those, because every situation could be different. Other documents, PennDOT documents. PennDOT does not recognize Ron transactions with their title and registration forms. So yeah, regarding that, PennDOT's a no. And then when it comes to wills and POAs, I can't give you a concrete answer. I would contact an attorney.
Miller, some places are requiring wet signatures and are not willing to accept the remote notary as legitimate. Why don't other companies know that this method of notarization is allowed? That's a question I cannot answer. Why people don't know that the technology exists, that it's legal, I really don't know.
Catherine says, is there any additional license, or would remote notary be noted on the license? On your commission certificate, it just mentions that you're a notary public. On the state's website, though, if you do go through the e-notarization process and or RON, it would be noted, like Brian said, that you are e-notary capable.
Where can I register to get the electronic notary certification? That is at the Department of State's website. dos.pa.gov is their main website. There is a much more detailed website that you can go to. I'm afraid if I post it, I'm going to lose the questions that I'm looking at now. So somewhere in the chat box, you will see that link. The document that we posted before and will post again has that same link to that Department of State website. But we'll make sure we post that again before we end today.
Should have took your advice, because I clicked and then I didn't realize when I hit enter.
I'll take the next one then.
Yeah, I'm scrolling.
Kirsten says other states do not have to utilize an approved vendor. Would the state of Pennsylvania ever consider this option? I work for a large publicly traded corporation that currently has a contract with an approved vendor, DocuSign. This vendor is requiring my company to sign a separate contract to set up an account to utilize the RON feature, which is very costly even for a big corporation. What Pennsylvania will and will not do depends on the law and depends on the regulations that are set up. I can't answer that question. I'm going to say probably not. I think they're going to go forward with the design the way they have it, and the approval will need to be made by the state before you use the technology.
Just scrolling. I'm caught up now. Thank you, Brian, for that. Yeah, so I see a lot of comments. I'm trying to scroll for the next question because I see some conversation between the participants, which is awesome. So I'm down to Sean here. I see a question that says, if we use our current notarial journal and only use one, how do we document in the current journal? So they're stating that they're not going to use electronic journal, and they're just going to use the same paper journal for both. I guess technically, can they do that, Brian? Or is it?
Are you allowed, when you do a remote online notarization, can you document it in your paper journal? Is that what Sean's question is?
Not use an electronic style journal.
Yeah, you're allowed.
So then in that case, you just need to keep everything consistent. You got to be in order, one stamp, one entries, or in this case, one electronic stamp, one entry. So it keeps everything in the correct order.
You just need to be really, really aware of what's going on, that you don't go so fast that you forget to make you got to stop, pick up your pen, write it down, then move on to the next thing. Let's see. Melanie, do you need a separate commission for e-notary, or does it run the same as your current notary? Melanie, once you're commissioned as a notary, you're a notary. You can't notarize electronically or remotely until you get approval from the state, but it's not a separate commission. And as far as concurrency is concerned, you can sign up to be an or a remote online notarization, online notary at any point during your commission. But if you sign up 2 years in, it's going to expire at the end of that regular notary commission. And then you would need to reapply.
Arlene's asking if we can put the links to the YouTube video, which I didn't scroll down to see if we did yet. If we did not, when I get down there, I will post them. Also, keep in mind, the links are on the handout as well. So that's something, if you do have that handout, they're on there.
And the YouTube videos are on there too.
Exactly. And then
Right.
Kelly
Is that what you just
said?
About,
yeah, no, yeah, both links are on there on that handout. And then Kelly's asking about the cost, and I think she just popped in maybe late, and it's going to depend per vendor. You need to contact them and see, because every vendor's different.
Marianne's mentioning the links on the state's website don't work. I was just out there and I was clicking on them. They seem to work. So it could be something with the way your web browser is set up. I don't know, but I checked it this morning and they were working.
I just checked and it's working on my end too. So it could be a firewall issue, or, you know, if you're at your place of employment, I'm thinking.
Yes, but check to make sure that there's not a pop-up blocker. Sometimes those pop-up blockers hide and you can't see them, and you're clicking on the link and at the top of the screen is a little pop-up blocker that appears, but if you don't see it, you just have to turn it off.
And that's I'm just reading some comments about the fees. Like, I know we can't be specific, but I see from the participants, it's looking pretty costly from what people are saying in the comments. So that's just good to know, you know, the good takeaway for my end here.
Rocio wants to send the link where he or she can sign him or herself up on the list of notaries. I'm assuming that's the PAN members. That I would recommend contacting customer service about. They're going to be best able to help you with that. How do you get paid for on transactions? Claire wants to know. Billing. It's like anything else. You bill notary fees and clerical and or administrative fees like you do for any notarization, and that's how you get paid.
Andre says, what insurance would we recommend that covers RON notarizations? My E&O says no RON. If you're a PAN member, contact us, especially the customer service team. They can actually get you to our insurance company, and they can recommend. Myself and Brian, Crystal Ann, we're not insurance agents. We can't recommend a certain package or whatnot, but give a call in the customer service. They can get you into the right direction.
I do know for a fact, and I can say this without being an insurance agent, that our policies, our E&O policies, don't have restrictions for RON, and they cover any notarization, however it's performed, you know, electronically, on paper, or remotely, as long as you're following the current laws and regulations as set by the state. Let's see. If I applied and was approved for e-notary and haven't done anything, do I have to reapply? Linda, it honestly depends on how long ago it was. If your commission has expired since you applied and were approved, or if your technology has expired since you were approved, yes, you would need to reapply for permission to notarize electronically or remotely, or both.
The companies I see online that hire remote notaries safe, and they're located in a different state. So can I seek employment for out of state for being a RON notary? To answer your second question, can you seek employment to, you know, do notarizations out of state? Yeah, I mean, as long as the company that's hiring you on realizes that as a remote notary, you need to be located in Pennsylvania. So if that's what you're going to be approved as, when it comes to if they're being safe, there's no way of us knowing that. I would just say do your due diligence, research them. You know, Google can be your friend. Check out reviews, see what people say about them. That would be the best advice I could give.
I like Elizabeth's comment about doing them several times a month and it being a lifesaver during our shift to remote work. That's a good thing. It's a positive thing. Let's see. we have 2 notaries in our company and we use Sinex. We had to pay 2 license fees, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we're just getting people commenting on the costs and things. People asking for the links.
So Cynthia's saying,
Cynthia,
yeah, but
it's going to be posted on YouTube. So you'll have to look out. We will have to look out for that because we're not going to send notifications when the recordings are ready. Not like we did with our original webinars.
yeah, there's a possibility it'll be uploaded on social media, the recording. Keep in mind, Cynthia, we do have, if let's say you're free this afternoon, the same presentation Brian's going to put on, and we start at 3 p.m. So if that's something that interests you, after you leave here today, contact customer service and they can get you the link where you can sign up for the 3 p.m. version. Nothing. So people, if you want to come back, it's going to be the same presentation, but if you miss something, that's always
Could be
an option
different
too.
questions. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Catherine wants to know what's the difference between remote online notarization and electronic notarization. Well, let me tell you what's the same first. What's the same is that the document is not paper, but it's electronic. Now, the difference between electronic notarization and remote online notarization is pretty huge. With electronic notarization, the notary and the customer are meeting in the same place. And they are performing the notarization face-to-face, just like a traditional paper-based notarization, but they would be signing and notarizing the electronic document. Now, remote online notarization, which is also a document which was created and stored electronically, is done when the notary located in Pennsylvania notarizes for somebody anywhere in the world, not in their presence physically, but the personal appearance requirement is met when the notary and the remotely located individual meet online using Pennsylvania state approved audio visual communication technology. So I hope I explained that well.
I think you did. Is there any way to remotely watch someone sign, then have them send the original that they signed to me, add my original stamp and signature? My bosses, which is attorneys, keep telling me there is, but I wasn't sure. Ron doesn't seem to be set up that way on what they want. No, traditionally Ron is going to be done in real time. Like Brian said, everything's done contemporaneously. It's going to be done right then and there, no delay. Is there a way around that? There's not going to be really a way around that.
Wendy says the notary must be physically sitting in the state when doing a RON, correct? Yes, you must be in Pennsylvania when you are performing the remote online notarization. It's the customer that can be anywhere.
Mitchell says, John, when you say PennDOT does not recognize RON for title registration, does this include VIN power of attorneys and used with title work? From the best of my knowledge, PennDOT was not accepting anything when it came to titling and registration, RON notarizations. For a VIN POA, again, that's something that's not specified, but they were pretty specific when it came to titling and registration. I don't know if PennDOT's going to accept. I don't know if you have any more to add on that, Brian. They weren't really specific. PennDOT just comes out and says that they don't really recognize it.
Do we recommend an E&O vendor? Again, we don't recommend anyone necessarily, but I do know that, Andre, that our policies at PAN do not have a restriction for RON. So if you contact PAN, they can get you in touch with one of the insurance agents and they can talk to you about the coverage that we offer.
Nicole says, I have a letter authorizing me to perform electronic notaries, but on the state's notary search website, it says e-notary status as no. So just taking a guess here, Nicole, possibly you could have applied and then they could have approved you, but then you never went through the process, finishing it up, going through one of the vendors, picking a vendor, letting the state know which vendor you went with. And then after that, then they typically will switch your status to e-notary capable. So that's what I'm thinking happened. If not, I would then contact them, because if you went through all that and you still say no, you need to contact the state. They should update your status.
LB asks, if the company I want to work for is located in another state, can I remotely notarize as long as I'm in Pennsylvania? Yes, as long as you go through the process of getting approved as an electronic notary, you've signed an agreement with one of the electronic notarization vendors. It doesn't matter where the company you're working for is, it matters where you are.
So before we finish, I'm going to take the next question, but just as a reminder, there's a chance we won't get through every single question. If we don't, or you have additional questions after this webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to put our shared email address in the chat box. So when you leave here today, you think of something else, send us an email. You might get answers from 1, 2, if not all 3 of us, depending on how quick we are. So just wanted to throw that out there before noon hit, because when noon hits, we'll be shutting down. My client that is in another country wants a raw notarization. Do they need to be an American citizen? If you're in Pennsylvania, your customer can be actually located anywhere in the world. It should be in a language, there's notarial certificate that is in English, but also if they're in another country, the notarization should have the dealing with business in the United States. It needs to have a reason why you're doing business here. If not, then I don't believe the raw notarization would be good for that situation.
Paul asked, do you know if Pennsylvania requires a federal bridge certificate? Thank you. Not a term I'm familiar with. I can tell you that term is not mentioned anywhere in the notary law or in the proposed regulations. So my guess is the answer is no.
Are paper copies used at all in RON? The only time is if the recorder does not accept a RON notarization. What can be done is the notary can actually make a certified copy of the RON transaction, and that could be recorded at the recorder of deeds. But typically everything's done digitally, electronically, no paper involved.
So maybe she's asking, can it start as paper? Maybe that's the question. If that's the case, I believe you can create an electronic document by scanning a paper document, if that's the question you're asking.
Good way to look at it, yeah.
But in the end, the notarization is performed electronically on an electronic document and is not printed out. So LB says, if I decide to switch vendors after selecting one for my application due to change of employment and equipment, can I do that? You can always apply to work with a new vendor, I believe, but that's something you would need to go through the state to do. That's the last question I see.
Yeah, what I'm doing, because I'm going to upload a few things, because I know we made some promises and we were kind of behind. So what I wanted to do was upload some links. In that one hand that I just put is some links to the YouTube page on the videos. So if you click on there, you'll see links in there. And then also there's going to be a link to the state's website. I'm going to post one more time just in case if we missed it.
Yeah, he just posted the link to this.
Perfect.
I want to hold it still so it doesn't ghost out.
All right. And then, you know what? Lastly, I'm going to just do us all a favor and put our YouTube page. I will take you directly there. And there's tons of videos, so that's something you could check out. What if a RON company that someone has been using falls off the list of approved vendors? What happens to the records stored there? I mean, I believe they're responsible to, they're responsible to hold on to them for at least 10 years, like we mentioned. If not, I would imagine they need to contact you or transfer those over to another company, but I can't say for certain. Never came across that.
Crystal and I both had the same great idea, and that was when we are finished, which is not quite yet. We're still open for business. Elizabeth, don't worry. You can send us an email to instructors@notary.org. Again, as John mentioned earlier, there are 3 of us, John, Brian, Crystal Ann, and sometimes you get an answer from one, sometimes you get an answer from all 3 of us. It really just depends on the day and who types the fastest. That's what we mean by emails. So does the approved vendor create the electronic version of our stamp, or does the Department of State do that? The Department of State would never create a stamp. They don't create your official stamp that comes in a physical format. They don't create your electronic stamp. And depending on the vendor of technology that you used will depend on how they create your persona, as you might put it, and how that appears on the document. So sometimes it's just there and you can't see it. Sometimes it's there and there's like a visual representation of the stamp on the document. It honestly depends on the vendor. It's the vendor that does that.
Elaine says, unrelated to Ron, can I start using my new stamp on the day that my old commission expires, or do I still use the old stamp that day? That's going to be your call. My recommendation is I use my stamp until the day, like that day. And then when 12:01, right after midnight, 12:01 a.m. hits, that's whenever I'm no longer using that old stamp. And then I'm going to destroy it. Then I'm going to use my new stamp for my next 4 years.
And
that's
again, to pile on a little bit, to piggyback is a better way to put it. Because your commission begins and ends on the same day, 4 years apart, truly it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Because there's one day that both stamps are effective. So take your pick.
Exactly.
Take your pick. So if there are any other questions at this point, go ahead and type them up, send them to us in the chat box, and we'll take a stab at answering them. We're going to stay out here for just a few more minutes if nothing comes in. And if not, we'll wish you good day, and we'll go eat lunch. Does your embossing seal expire? There's another non-Ron related question. LB, if it was created by us, it does not expire. It doesn't have an expiration date on it. It has your name, the words Notary Public, and the words Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that's it. You are welcome. Lots of thank yous popping in.
Yeah, appreciate that. The link will not be sent out, but the link of the replay will be on YouTube and more than likely shared on our social media page, Facebook. So keep a lookout for that, but that won't be for a few days. We got to do some editing and whatnot, but yeah, keep a lookout for that. But a lot of thank yous coming in. We appreciate that a lot. We've been meaning to do a webinar here. It's just been kind of busy getting back onto the road. We were a lot of times just doing Zooms from home during the pandemic. So now that we're getting back to the swing of things, we don't have as much free time, but we love doing these.
I'm looking at Constance's background. Is that Sarah and Landon? You can nod.
Awesome.
Those must be her kids or something. There you go. See? Nosy little instructor that I am.
We got a bunch of thank yous. So I think we're finished up here, it looks like. Yeah, so look at that. I know now more about Ron than I did before. So that's a good thing. Took a couple things away. The handout is on Pan's website. It is not. So what I'll do one more time is post that in the chat box, just in case if we need it, because it is not on the website. It's not. I'm posting it right there. It should upload PDF, so you can print that out, save it. It's yours.
Another thing that I'll do today, just in case, I'm going to email the document to our customer service reps so they have it. So if you were to call, they could email it out to you.
So, yeah, it doesn't look
like
any more questions.
We're not going to have the capability to email, 500 of you the document and probably put us into apoplexy. What if you remotely notarize a document on a platform and the client informs you that your notarization was not accepted by the requesting agency? Again, whether or not a document is accepted or not doesn't mean that it's not done properly or legally. You may need to do it to their satisfaction some other way, but typically before a remote online notarization is performed, everybody's in agreement. The notary, the customer, and the person who's going to be receiving the document. So I don't really suspect that's going to happen, but I suppose it could. So let me try to put the link in there. We're getting that's not the right link. Okay. Again, the link to the Department of State's website is on this document at the bottom. I know it's ghosting out. I'm sorry. So if you download this or you even open it on your screen, you should be able to click on the link in the document, and it does work. If it doesn't work on the document, something's wrong on your end. I apologize. Well, thank you, Jody. She thinks we presented the information well and provided the answers most of us were interested to know. You are welcome, Bonnie. Bonnie Indelicarto. That's a good name. I like that. Try to find names that I are interesting to pronounce. Excellent, excellent. Glad that you liked it, everyone. So let's say we're going to stay out for another 60 seconds. If no other questions come in, we're going to go ahead and shut the room down. Again, we're going to be doing this once again at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The attendance in that one is not as big as this one was, or at least the enrollment. So if you missed the beginning, you want to hear it again, it's the same information. The questions might be different, probably very similar though. You're welcome to enroll in that class as well. You're welcome, everyone. We were glad to help you today. A big thank you from Crystal. It's different login information, David. You would need to go back out to the place where you made the enrollment, and there's a separate link to sign up for the afternoon class, and it would send you another email with the link for that particular session. You're welcome. I'll wave to you, Joanne. Bye. Waving to Constance too. The people that I can see, not everyone's on the same screen, so. You're welcome, Sherry. Yep, we're finished, everyone. If you want to go ahead and sign off, you can. Again, we're going to hang out for another minute here just in case.
All right. Well, looks like, yeah, as I say, a bunch of thank yous.
Again,
Well, I guess, yeah.
Probably in about 30 seconds, we're gonna sign off. So if you lose us, that's why. But you're welcome to leave the room at this point, because we're not going to say anything else at this point. We're just kind of relaxing. Bye, everyone.
See ya. Take care, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that you would have to end the meeting for everyone, because technically you're the host because you signed on first, John.
Correct. So I'm ending it now.